am Ramona, and welcome to Ramona Interviews. And with me in the chair today is David Baker. Now, David Baker is biographed in Who's Who in Industry and Finance. He's also on Who's Who in America. He is a semi-retired entrepreneur and researcher. Welcome back, David Baker.
It's good to be here.
Thank you. It's wonderful to have you. So, the last time that you were on, just for a quick recap for my audience, the main theme that you were talking about was what? In the economy. Now, because we usually base things on the economy and financial system.
We spoke about, I believe, about the financial system, monetary system, things like that.
Okay. And today, you're going to open us up with a quote, which is then going to lead down to a multiple of very interesting things that you have found through your research. And that quote is by Thomas Jefferson, so I'll let you
Yes,
proceed.
it is. Yeah, and I have to paraphrase, but he said, if ever we allow private banks to issue our money, that the banks and the corporations that grow up around them will deprive the citizens of all their wealth, and they will wake up as slaves in a nation their fathers conquered.
And this was Thomas Jefferson.
Yeah, imagine that long ago having that much insight. It's,
into how things could go. Could go. And you feel that that's happening today?
Well, yeah, I think we're in very serious trouble. It's financially, it's as though we're on a river, going down a river on a raft, and we hear this roaring sound, but we don't know what it is. We don't know that it's a waterfall. Now, as the river picks up speed and the water gets more agitated as we approach the fall, there's still time to make it to one shore or the other. But at a certain point, the distance to both shores is greater than the distance to the edge of the falls. And we're very close to that position right now, I believe. And so we don't have a lot of time. And chances are we're not going to have enough time to prevent hyperinflation.
What is hyperinflation as you've researched it?
Well, hyperinflation is a more exaggerated form of inflation. And inflation is when too much money chases too few goods and services. And of course, we've been printing money like crazy. A few years back, the Federal Reserve announced that they would no longer release a figure known as the M3, and that's the amount of new money being created out of thin air. The only reason that I could think of for not releasing that figure, which has traditionally always been released, would be if you intended to hyperinflate. So well before our present perils started, I think things were in the works to crash the economy.
What are some examples of hyperinflation? You wanted to talk about different countries that experience different things.
There are people alive today that can remember several instances of hyperinflation. The most notable probably would be in Germany in 1923, following the First World War. The German pound used to be on a par with the dollar, so that if you had a million pounds, you had the spending power of about $1 million. By the end of 1923, it had lost so much value that the exchange rate was 1 billion to 1. Not 1 million to 1, 1 billion to 1. So that if you were a billionaire and you had a worth of $1 billion, you had the equivalent in spending power of 1 US silver dollar, which in today's value, because of then they use silver in the money, would be worth about $20 to $25. Things in more recent history, you've had Mexico. I remember not that many years ago that the Mexican peso was in trouble, and when it got down to half of its value, so where people had lost half of their spending power, the U.S. came in and basically bailed them out with loans and stabilized it at that point. Otherwise, it probably would have continued to fall.
Right.
Other South American countries were affected, Argentina and Brazil. In Argentina, a person might make, an average person might make 500 Argentine pesos a week. But after their hyperinflation, that would pay for 1 cup of coffee.
I mean, you can't even imagine that.
You imagine working a week for a cup of
coffee. I mean, you can't even imagine that.
It can be worse because in Brazil around the same time, they use a unit of currency called the cruzado. And I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but a worker might make 1,000 cruzados a week, or a mille cruzado. That also collapsed, along with the Argentine peso, to the point where that would not be quite enough to pay for a cup of coffee.
Wow. How do governments deal with that? I mean, they just, do you ever really solve that problem? Do they just like get loans from everybody else, which isn't backed by anything at all, and then then it just kind of props it up so that it's worth something again? I mean, is that not a short-term answer?
Central banks tend to prop up other central banks because they don't want the fraud to be exposed. So obviously it's to their interest to bail out other countries. But at some point you run out of people to
bail you out.
Now today there's serious hyperinflation in the world, and for some reason it's almost as if it's a complete news blackout. In Zimbabwe, because Zimbabwe used to be known as Rhodesia when it was under British rule, when the British left, they formed a new government, and they instead of Rhodesia, they call it Zimbabwe, and they issued a new currency known as the Zimbabwe dollar. In Zimbabwe, the hyperinflation in the last few years has gotten so bad that 2 years ago, they had to issue their largest note because as the money became worth less, they had to make larger denominations to make it practical. Otherwise, you
couldn't carry all that.
You wouldn't be able to carry it. And they issued their largest note, which is 150 million Zimbabwe dollars.
In one note?
In one note. Years ago, that would buy 15 loaves of bread.
Okay.
Since then, things have gotten worse. And they've issued their largest note ever, the $100 trillion Zimbabwe note.
Oh my heavens.
Today that will buy 1 loaf of bread or a gallon of goat milk. If you want the bread and the goat milk, you have to come up with another $100 trillion. Their government has asked the people not to use their money. They're asking them to use other currencies. And they're claiming because using their money is a hardship on the government because most of the time the cost of the paper and ink exceeds the face value of the note.
I was going to say, it must. If you keep, obviously there's this downward spiral going on that is not, and no one's bailing out Zimbabwe.
No.
Is hyperinflation, obviously it must have, there must be many factors that build to it. Nothing happens overnight and nothing happens because of just one step. But in not having a kind of accountability to your spending. In other words, it just spending nilly-willy. It's like everybody in government goes on a shopping spree. You know what I mean? It isn't their money, there's no accountability, and everybody just keeps spending.
Sure.
Nobody bothers to see really what you're spending versus what you're taking in. Okay, and after years and years and years and years and years of covering this up or of not addressing this issue, you end up with hyperinflation. Is that a kind of simplified?
Yeah, and the spending today is so outrageous that if you take just the present administration, and all administrations have been guilty of this, but just the present administration to date, the increase, not the total, but the increase in the national debt exceeds all of the national debt from the time of George Washington to George W. Bush. So I mean that was.
Yeah, it was a span of years over a short period of time.
A lot of years.
Yeah.
And a lot of debt, but in just the last few years, we've actually exceeded all that was spent in since the late 1700s.
Hundreds, yeah. Well, you know, I'll play devil's advocate on that, and I'll also say that, you know, populations have changed, growth has changed, standard of living has changed. You know, what people expect has changed. Globalization, as far as our, we won't even go into the military aspect of that, what they call global containment, and that whole philosophy, but also just our manufacturing base having shifted to other countries. It's gone. Yes, it's gone. We can just salute it goodbye, more or less. This has also played into how we spend and why we spend.
Sure.
We can obviously argue, you know, what was worth spending on and what wasn't. And I think that there's a long list of just totally egregious, greedy, you know, no business being done spending. You know, and it still goes on today, nickel and diming with bridges to nowhere, which is, I mean, everybody uses that, but it just kind of typifies that, you know, I need it for my district, or I want it for this, or it's needed for that, and it's baloney.
It's basically buying votes.
Yes, and these types of things need to change, but now you're talking about every person who makes policy decision has to make a change on a personal level, because you can legislate that, and maybe that would be a good thing to some extent, but if you don't stop the core of that person or persons saying, I just want for wanting, or this is the way the system is, so this is the way I want it to be, it's not, you know, it's not going to change very quickly.
It's not as bad as it is for us. It will be much worse for future generations, because
absolutely,
it's just pushing the debt forward.
Thank you for being on.
Well, it was a pleasure.
Thank you, and we'll definitely have you back, because there's so many topics and there's so many different things. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Thank you so much.
Well, it's a pleasure.
Thank you. I'm Ramona, and you've been watching Ramona Interviews.